Here is your story. But behind these walls, we found each other. The night officer Dana Reyes walked onto Block C for the first time. She was told not to feel anything. Her supervisor had pressed those exact words into her chest like a badge. Don't get attached, don't get involved. Keep your distance. And she had nodded, clipped her belt and told herself she understood. But understanding something and living it are two very different kinds of weight. And Dana would spend the next 8 months learning exactly how heavy the difference could be. Block C housed 42 women, most of them forgotten by the world. Outside the concrete walls of Harlow Correctional Facility, they had numbers instead of names on intake sheets, case files instead of histories, infractions instead of stories. Dana had seen places like this before. She had done her training in a county jail that smelled of mold and resignation. But Harlow was different. Harlow had a quietness to it, a pressure that sat inside the air like something waiting to break. She noticed it in the way the women moved through the corridors. Always slightly braced, always slightly small. She told herself she would stay professional. She told herself she would not see them as anything more than her responsibility. She was wrong about both of those things. She met Mara on her third shift. Mara Castillo was 29 years old, serving a 4-year sentence for a crime that her file described in cold, bureaucratic language, though nothing in that language could capture the desperation that had driven her to it. She had stolen medication, not to sell, not for herself, but for her younger sister who was dying and uninsured. The judge had called it a serious offense. Mara had called it the only option she had left. She sat in the common room that evening with a book open in her lap and her dark hair falling across her face, and Dana had paused at the door longer than she should have, watching the way Mara's lips moved slightly when she read, as if every word deserved to be spoken aloud, as if words were still precious even here. Dana told herself it was nothing. She was observing her block. That was her job. The other woman came into Dana's awareness more slowly, in the way that deep things often do. Sasha Venn had been at Harlow for 2 years before Dana arrived. She was 33, quiet in the way that still water is quiet, not empty, not calm, but full of something moving beneath the surface. She had been convicted on charges connected to a domestic violence case that had spiraled into tragedy. And there were women on the block who knew her story and kept close to her because of it, not despite it. Sasha spent her mornings near the window in the east corridor, watching the light change over the yard, and Dana began to notice that Mara always found her way to that window too. She would sit beside Sasha and they would talk in low voices, their shoulders almost touching, sharing the kind of closeness that only grows in places where everything else has been stripped away. Dana watched them the way you watch something, rare and fragile, with the breathless knowledge that you are witnessing something that the world outside would never see, something that existed only because these walls had forced two people together and then, impossibly, let something beautiful grow between the cracks. She knew the rules. She had memorized them the way you memorize the lyrics to a song you're not sure you believe in anymore. No personal relationships with inmates. No emotional entanglements. Maintain authority. Maintain distance. The rules existed for reasons, she knew that. But rules are written for average circumstances. And what was happening inside Harlow was not average. It was human. It was achingly, devastatingly human. The first moment Dana broke, and not the rules, but herself, was on a night in November, when a woman on the block had a medical emergency, and the chaos of it sent everyone into a quiet, frightened panic. Afterward, when the medics had come and gone, and the block had settled back into its tense silence, Dana found Mara sitting alone in the corridor, with her back against the wall, and her knees pulled to her chest, and her hands shaking. Dana should have kept walking. She stopped. She sat down on the floor, a correctional officer in full uniform, sitting on a prison floor beside an inmate, and she did not say a word. She just stayed, and Mara looked at her with eyes that were raw and exhausted and said very quietly that she had not had someone simply stay with her in a very long time. Dana felt something open inside her chest that she was not sure she knew how to close again. Sasha noticed the shift before anyone else did. She had always been perceptive in the way that people who have survived profound things become perceptive. Reading rooms reading silence, reading the space between what is said and what is meant. She watched Dana with careful eyes in the weeks that followed. Not with suspicion, but with a kind of measured recognition, as if she were trying to determine whether Dana was safe. And Dana, aware of being watched, felt the weight of that question like a hand pressed flat against her sternum. She was an officer. She held power over these, women's daily lives, in ways that were uncomfortable to examine. She could grant small kindnesses and withhold them. She could look the other way, or she could look directly. That asymmetry sat between her and any possibility of honest connection, like a glass wall, invisible, impossible to pretend away. It was Sasha who finally dissolved that wall, not with grand gestures, but with a single act of honesty. She stopped Dana one morning in the corridor and said, very simply, that she knew what was happening, that she had seen kindness weaponized before, and she was watching carefully, and that if Dana was genuine, then Sasha would trust her with the most important thing she had left in this place. Mara. Dana stood in that corridor for a long moment, the weight of the statement settling over her, and she said the only honest thing she could say. She said that she did not fully understand what she felt or what it meant, but that she had never in her life wanted to cause harm to someone the way others had caused harm to both of them, and that she would rather walk away entirely than risk becoming another wall closing in. Sasha looked at her for a long time. Then she nodded, and something shifted. But if you believe in kindness, if you think that even the most forgotten places deserve to hold love, take a moment right now to like this video. It costs nothing, but it tells the world that stories like this one matter. But what grew between the three of them was not something with a clean name. It was not a romance in the way stories are usually told. It was something more complicated and more tender. A triangle of witnessing, each of them holding something for the others that the world outside had refused to hold. Dana brought books for Mara, slipped inside approved materials chosen carefully, each one a small message in a language that had no words. Mara wrote. She had always written, even before Harlow, filling notebooks with the things she could not say aloud. And she began to leave pages where Dana would find them, folded small and precise, filled with the kind of truth that only comes out in the dark. Sasha became the anchor of the three of them, the one who kept watch, who remembered the rules so the other two did not have to carry them alone, who understood that love, in whatever form it takes, requires someone willing to hold the perimeter. When Mara's release date arrived on a cold morning in March, Dana stood at her post and did not allow herself to cross any line. She stood straight and professional and said goodbye, with her eyes in the way you say goodbye, when your mouth is not permitted to. Mara walked out of the gate and did not look back, because looking back would have undone them both. But 3 weeks later, Dana received a letter, forwarded through appropriate channels, entirely within regulations, that contained a single folded page in handwriting she would have recognized anywhere. It said that being seen had saved her. That kindness from an unexpected place had reminded her that she was still worth kindness, that she was learning, slowly, how to live again outside these walls. Sasha's release came 6 months later. Dana was not on shift that day. She had requested the morning off because some goodbyes deserved to be private, even in their grief. She sat in her apartment and held the complicated weight of everything that had happened inside those walls, everything she had felt and not acted on, everything she had given that could not be taken back. She thought about the rules, and she thought about what the rules were designed to protect, and she thought about whether she had honored the spirit of them even when she had bent their letter. She thought she had. She hoped she had. But before you scroll away, if this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that love does not ask permission and that humanity survives even in the harshest places, please leave a comment below and tell us what part moved you most. Your words become part of this story too. But Dana never sought either of them out afterward. That was her own line, the one she had drawn for herself, the one that kept everything clean and honest, but she carried them with her. Carried Mara's folded pages and Sasha's steady, measuring gaze in the memory of that November night on the corridor floor. And she was not the same officer she had been before. She was softer in ways that made her better at her job, not worse. She saw the women on her block differently. She stayed when staying mattered. She sat on floors when people needed someone not to move. She learned in the end what she should have known from the beginning, that the most radical thing a person in a position of power can do is simply, quietly choose to see, not to fix, not to save, just to witness with full presence and without flinching, the humanity of another person, in a place built to erase that humanity. It was an act of quiet revolution, and it cost her nothing except the willingness to feel it, which, she had learned, was the most expensive thing in the world. Some loves do not end. They transform. They become the way you move through the world. The gentleness you carry in your hands, the patience in your eyes when you look at someone the system has decided to forget. Dana carried hers like that. Not as a wound, not as a loss, but as the truest education she had ever received, taught in the most unlikely classroom, by two women who had every reason to have stopped believing in kindness and had not. They had not. And neither because of them had she